Okay, Algebra 2, this is the last day of review. Tomorrow we'll go over some whiteboards and do that to get ready for your test over Chapter 3, but we have, I don't know, the 7th period class, we still have this bottom part to do, but the 8th period class, I'm going to start this video off and have you guys do 18 through 34 because that's all the 8th period class has left. So 7th period, if you're watching this, go ahead and skip this middle part and we'll do that middle part tomorrow. So 18 through 34 is what we're going to do today, and here we go. These 8 questions here are all solving by factoring, okay? So I'm going to write off to the side, and make sure you write these off to the side because you get to use this on your test, the different ways of factoring, okay? So it doesn't really matter which one of these goes first. Greatest common factor is the one that I usually think of first. And then we have a difference of squares, and then we have simple trinomial, and we have a complex trinomial, okay? So as we go through these, I think there's 2 of each type in here, and I'm pretty sure like they go together. Like these 2 are the same, these 2 are the same, these 2 are the same, these 2 are the same. So what would be a good idea for you as we review through this? Like we'll maybe do this, this first one together, maybe pause the video, and then you try to do this one on your own, and then I'll reveal the answer to that one, okay? So make sure that as we're going through this, you kind of understand and know what you're doing and are going through the process and not just writing down what I write down, because that's not going to prepare you for the test. So 18, let's figure out which one of these 4 methods it is, because then after that you can kind of have an idea of knowing what to do, okay? So number 18, he's 3 pieces, so that tells me trinomial, and it's just x squared, so that's simple trinomial. So I'm going to put an ST next to him, and I think 19 is the same way as well, simple trinomial. So those are going to be the same. All right, so in a simple trinomial, we're looking for what do you multiply to get negative 12, but when you add them, give you negative 4. Okay, and if you need to make a list, you can. So negative 12 would be like 1 and 12, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. And the combination that's going to give me negative 4 is going to be 2 and 6. But the 2 has to be positive and the 6 has to be negative in order to be that negative 4. Okay, so all I have to do is do my 2 little bubbles, and my 2 numbers are going to be positive 2. So x plus 2 and x minus 6. And then I set each one of those pieces equal to 0. So if x plus 2 is equal to 0, and I subtract the 2 over, x is equal to negative 2. Some of you guys can do that in your head, and that's fine. You don't have to write all that work out. X minus 6 equals 0, so you add the 6 over, and x equals positive 6, okay? And so these 2 are going to be my 2 zeros, okay? Or the place where this parabola crosses, okay? All right, so if you need to pause, go ahead and do that now, and then I'll reveal the answer to this, okay? So multiply to get 64, add to get 16. If you need to make a list, 64 has a lot. 1 and 64, 2 and 32, 4 and 16. The one I'm thinking of, I think, is 8 and 8, okay? And 8 and 8 is the combination that I want, but it has to be a negative 16, so each of those 8s have to be negative. So when I do this, my 2 numbers are negative 8, so x minus 8 and x minus 8. And then if I set those equal to 0, x will be positive 8 and x will be positive 8, which is really the same number, so I only have 1 0 here. And what's happening there is that at positive 8, I only have 1 0, and that's where the vertex is. So just keep that in the back of your mind that, like, you know, there's only 1 0, and that's because it is the vertex, okay? And a lot of you know that already. So there's simple trinomial. Now let's move on to the next one. So 20 is not a trinomial at all, and it's not a difference of squares. Although it is a difference, it has a minus sign. You can't take the square root of 6. So I'm thinking possibly greatest common factor, okay, because out of these 2 pieces, there's an x that they have in common, okay, so I can pull that x out. So I'm going to put GCF here, okay, greatest common factor, and we're going to look at these 2 pieces. I'm going to pull an x out in front, okay, and if I take that x out, I'll have an x left over, and then I'll have minus 6, okay, and then what I do is I just set each piece equal to 0. So like this first one, this seems so weird that like this is kind of his own bubble. So this x equals 0, and I don't have to solve anything. Like that's it. versus x minus 6. If he equals 0, I would add the 6 over, and so x would be positive 6. So that one I have to work for just a little bit, but x equals 0 and x equals 6, those are going to be my two places where he crosses, okay? 21, if you need to pause, go ahead and do so and try to get 21 figured out. This one's a little bit harder. So same thing again, he's a GCF, and I'm going to pull an x out, because I think that's all I can pull out. 7 and 4 don't have anything in common. But if I pull that x out, I'll have 7x minus 4. And this one's a little bit trickier. I still set each piece equal to 0, so x equals 0. But this one I have to think about a little bit. 7x minus 4 equals 0. So this one, I'm going to add the 4 to the other side. So I have 7x equals 4, and then I divide by 7. So x will be, and 4 over 7 doesn't come out nicely, so we'll just leave it as 4 over 7. So he's going to cross at that really icky fraction-y place, but, you know, that's just how it works. So there's that one. Those are both the GCF ones. And then we have this one looks like a difference of squares. It has a difference, and I can take the square root of 81. That's 9. So I'm going to say DOS for this one. All right, we'll see if 23 is. I think it is also. All right, so difference of squares just breaks down into the two chunks, and all you do is you take the square root and you take the square root, okay? And this one's super fast. This one's my favorite out of the 4. So if you take the square root of x squared, it's just x, and if you take the square root of 81, it's 9, and one of them is positive and one of them is negative, and it doesn't matter which one comes first. But then I set like x plus 9 equal to 0, and if I would subtract the 9 over, that means x equals negative 9. It's just the opposite sign of what this one is. Here, if I did the same thing, x would be positive 9, okay? So I have two places he crosses, and they're at the same spot, but one's positive, one's negative, okay? All right, that was a difference of squares. This one's a little bit tougher, but this is also a difference of squares, so if you want to try this on your own, pause the video, and then I'll reveal the answer. Here you go. All right, my two chunks, I'm going to take the square root, and I'm going to take the square root. Okay. Ugh. My pen's going all over the place. Here we go. All right, the square root of 16x squared is 4x and 4x, so those go there and there, all right? The square root of 169 does come out nicely. It is 13. So 13 and 13, and one of them is plus and one of them is minus, okay? This one I have to do a little bit of work because I can't do it in my head. If I do 4x plus 13 equals 0, okay, I'm going to subtract the 13 over. So 4x equals negative 13, and then I will divide by 4. 13 does not divide by 4 nicely, so I'm just going to leave it as negative 13 over 4. If you want to make it a, like, negative 3 1/4 is what it would be, or negative 3.25. I don't care. You can go ahead and do that if you want to. This one, if I would do the same, it's going to come out to be the same answer, just the positive 13 over 4. Okay, that's always true with a difference of squares, kind of like we had over here. One of them's positive 9, one's negative 9. Same thing over here. One of the answers is negative 13 over 4, one's positive 13 over 4. So if you do the work on one side, you don't necessarily have to do the work on the other side because you know it's going to be just the opposite sign. Okay? All right, so that was a difference of squares. That one was a little tricky because those numbers were kind of ugly. Okay? If I'm going too fast, pause the video, catch up, whatever. Okay? Whatever you need to do to get ready. 24, this one, we saved the best for last, right? These are the complex trinomials, okay? And these, we know that they're complex because it has a 2 out in front of that, x squared, and it has 3 pieces. That's a trinomial, okay? So complex trinomial, and the first thing that we do, I don't know if you want to write steps out here. I can write steps out, I guess. Step number 1, A times C. If you need the steps, here they are. Okay, A times C. A is 2, and C is negative 5. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 times negative 5 is negative 10, and then I'm going to list out the factors of negative 10. Okay, and I'm going to try to find ones that add to get negative 3. So multiply to get negative 10, but add to get negative 3. So I have 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. And I think it's going to be 2 and 5 again. But if I want negative 3, it's got to be a positive 2 and a negative 5, okay? So then I'm going to after number 2, I find the factors. I find my factors, which are 2 and negative 5. And then step 3, I'm going to write 4 pieces. That's the step that I'm on now. So this 2x squared, he's going to stay, and this minus 5 over here is going to stay. But this 3x is going to separate into 2, and I'm going to put like plus 2x here and minus 5x here. These two numbers came from this list. That's what I've decided were those two numbers. That's what we needed to use. Okay, and then step 4, I'm going to go factor by grouping. Factor by grouping. Okay, so I'm going to group the first 2 and I'm going to group the second 2. Okay, so out of the first 2, we're going to pull some stuff out, and I'm going to pull out a 2 and an x. Okay, and what will be left over is I'll have an x here, but I won't have anything left over here. But you have to put plus 1, because if you don't, like if I try to multiply this back through, I should get 2x squared plus 2, but if I don't put anything here, I won't get that 2x when I multiply back through, okay? So you have to put plus 1. Now out of this one, I'm going to take out a negative and a 5, so that will be x plus 1 when I take that out, okay? Then I just do my 2 pieces, so like the piece that they have in common, that's how I know I did it right. X plus 1 is here, okay? I yank that out, and left over will be 2x minus 5. 2x minus 5. Huh, those are so long. Those are so long. And what I'm going to do last is I'm going to set them equal to 0. So if x plus 1 equals 0 and 2x minus 5 equals 0, and then I'm going to solve. That's the last step. So I'm going to subtract the 1 over. So x equals negative 1. And I'm going to add the 5. So 2x equals 5. And then I'm going to divide by 2. So x equals 5 over 2, and those are my 2 places he crosses. If you want to write 5 over 2 as 2.5 or 2.5, that's fine. I don't care, but I'll just leave him as 5 over 2, okay? All right, so if you need to pause there and regroup, that was a lot of stuff for one problem. I will give you 1 complex trinomial on the test, okay? So just kind of like, I guess we had one on the quiz, I think, too, the mid-chapter quiz. So yeah, so this one is also a complex trinomial. If you want to try this on your own, go for it. I'm going to do the answer right quick. I'm not going to write the steps out again. Here's your steps. If you want to put like a bubble around your steps, here they are, whatever, okay? But I'm not going to write out the steps. I'll just do the steps over here. So 4 times negative 15 is negative 60. That's a big number. Okay, and I want to add together to get negative 60, or excuse me, multiply to get negative 60, but when I add them, give me this middle number, which is 4, okay? So kind of similar process to a simple trinomial, but, you know, we're not looking at this number, we're looking at the 60 instead. Okay, so 60, oh heavens, is 1 and 60, or 2 and 30, or 3 and 20, or 4 and 15, or 5 and 12, or 6 and 10, and I think that's all. Okay, which one of those adds together to be positive 4? 6 and 10, but the 6 will need to be negative and the 10 is positive, because those will add to make a positive 4. Okay, now I'm on step number 3. I'm writing out my 4 pieces. So 4x squared stays, the minus 15 stays, but this breaks into 2. And that's going to be minus 6x plus 10x. Now, does it matter if you did the 10x first and then the 6? No, it doesn't. Your middle step, your work right here, if you put the 10 in this spot and the 6 in this spot, your middle work will look different than ours, but your final answer will look the same, okay? So now I'm going to group, and I'm going to group. So out of these 2, I'm going to take out a 2 and an x. Okay, 2x out of 4x squared is 2x minus 3, I believe, okay? And out of the second piece, I can take out a 5, a positive 5. So 5 out of 10x is 2x. 5 out of negative 15 is minus 3. So, hey, I did it right. 2x minus 3 is my 1 chunk. And if I yank that out, I'll have 2x plus 5 left over. These are kind of ugly. Okay, last thing. 2x minus 3 equals 0, and 2x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, I'm going to add the 3 over, so 2x equals 3, and then divide by 2. I'm running out of room. X equals 3 over 2, or you can put 1.5 or 1.5 is what 3 over 2 is. I'm just going to leave it as 3 over 2, and then I do the same thing, so I subtract the 5 over. 2x equals negative 5. Some of you guys can do this in your head, you subtract the 5, divide by 2, it's negative 5 over 2. Go for it. Then you don't have to write out so much work. But I'm going to write it all out just so that you have it all there, okay? X equals negative 5 over 2 from that, okay? Those are my 2 zeros. They're not very pretty. They're decimal ones, but, 2 places he crosses, okay? That's what we're looking at for all of these. We're finding the zeros, okay? Solve each equation. That means find the zeros, okay? I didn't label that last one. Complex trinomial. He's still a CT there, okay? All right, now let's do some better ones maybe here. Solve each equation by using the square root property. Okay, we practiced these on whiteboards in the 8th period class a ton. Okay, so here's my equal sign. Normally I would try to get this 16 and this 1 together on the same side because those are kind of like terms, but not for this one. I'm just going to deal with this chunk right here and find and break them down as basically a simple trinomial, okay? So what can you multiply to get 16, but when you add them give you 8, okay? So multiply to get 16, add to get 8 is 4, a positive 4 and a positive 4, okay? And I want that to be true because I want to write it as x plus 4 squared, right? I have to have those two bubbles be the same so I can write it as squared. Equals 1, okay? So I'm going to put equals 1 here, and then I'm going to take the square root to get rid of the square. Okay, the x plus 4 is going to fall out, and the square root of 1 is positive and negative 1, right? 1 times 1 will give me 1, right? Or negative 1 times negative 1 will give me 1. And then the last step is to subtract the 4 over. Okay, so x equals, I have a positive 1 minus 4, which is negative 3, and I have a negative 1 minus 4, which is a negative 5. So those are my 2 solutions to that, the 2 places where he crosses, which are really nice, okay? That was 26, all right? That's the square root property, all right? If you want to try these other 2 by yourself, go ahead and pause the video before we do them together, and then unpause whenever you're ready. So here we go. Here's my equal sign. 5 is going to stay over there and chill out. I'm looking at this to break down, and I want to multiply to get 9 and add to get negative 6. Make sure you don't ignore that negative, okay? And I know that has to be 3, but it has to be a negative 3 if I want it to add to be negative 6. I'm going to say equals 5. So I have x minus 3 squared equals 5. Okay, and then I'm going to take the square root. The more you do these, the faster it gets. X minus 3 equals, and the square root of 5 does not come out. And I almost like those better because then I don't have to do as much work. I can just say plus minus square root of 5 and be done, right? Except I have to add the 3 over yet. So plus 3. Now you can't add the 3 to this 5 because he's trapped inside, so you just write them side by side, and you probably know that. I write the 3 first, but it's not incorrect if you want to write the 5 first. So this is how I write it. If you wrote it as plus minus the square root of 5 and then plus 3, that's fine too. Okay, I just prefer to write it like this, whatever. Mainly because I don't like, sometimes my 3 will creep underneath of my bar if my bar gets too long, and this is the same format right here. This is the same format as the quadratic formula. It's this is like my negative b plus and minus the square root, okay? So it's kind of in that same format as the quadratic formula, which we'll do here in a second, okay? All right, 28. Last one, okay? If you need to pause, go ahead and do so. This guy, I'm going to break him down. Multiply to get 25 and add to get 10. So I think that's a positive 5 and a positive 5 because I'm wanting to make positive 10. So make sure you pay attention to this symbol right here. I want it to be positive. Equals 16. Okay, that can be written as x plus 5 squared equals 16. and then I'm going to take the square root, okay? X plus 5 is going to fall out, and the square root of 16 is positive and negative 4, okay? So this is going to have a similar answer to like what we had on 26. We're going to get two full numbers because the 16 came out. Ooh, where did it go? Because the 16 came out as a perfect 4, okay? I'm going to subtract the 5 over. So x equals, I have a positive 4 minus 5, which is negative 1. And I have, oh, I should have erased beforehand. And I have a negative 4 minus 5, which is negative 9. Those are going to be my two solutions, okay? Two places where he crosses. So the middle one was the only one that didn't come out nicely just because 5. And you can kind of anticipate that to start with. Like this number over here, if I'm doing the square root property, if he doesn't have a perfect square root, like he's not going to come out nicely. 16 has a perfect square root. 1 had a perfect square root, okay? So you can kind of anticipate those ones that are going to come out with two answers versus going to come out with a square root as an answer, okay? All right, we're almost there. We got 6 left. Completing the square, full-blown completing the square. All right, here's the steps. First one, we'll do this one together, and then you try to do 30 and 31 by yourself. So here we go. The first thing you do is you put the 7 or the C value over to the other side. So number 1, kick C to opposite side, if that makes any sense. Your C value is this guy right here, like A, B, C. C is that guy. So I'm going to add the 7 over. So I will have x squared plus 16x, but leave some room because we're going to put plus c and plus c there, okay? Then I'm going to break this thing down into two pieces and just pretend that I'm multiplying to get c, which we don't know what it is yet, but we're adding to get 16, okay? Well, two numbers that add together to get 16 that are the same number would have to be positive 8 and positive 8. Okay, so 8 and 8. And if that's the case, to figure out what your C value is, 8 plus 8 gives me 16, but 8 times 8 gives me this number, and that has to be 64. So my C value is going to be 64, and I'm going to add it there, and I'm going to add it there, 64, 64. So that means it's equal to 64 plus 7 is like 71. That's going to be an ugly number. All right, then this is x plus 8 squared equals 71. And the last thing I do is take the square root. So x plus 8 equals plus minus square root of 71. And then I guess not the last thing. Now I subtract the 8. Okay, the square root of 71 doesn't come out nicely, by the way. So we just leave it underneath of there. And then this final answer right here will look something like negative 8 plus minus the square root of 71. And that is all. Whew, this is a lot of stuff, okay? All right, 30, do the same way for, oh, I didn't write my steps out. Number 2, kick C to the opposite side, add plus C. 3 is find the factors. And then 4 is I'm going to do square root property. Because at a certain point, as soon as we get our factors done, we have it to like this point where we can just do the square root property and find our answers, okay? So if you need steps, there's your steps for completing the square. Completing the square, all right? It's a toughie. Just completing the square is a little bit difficult, okay? 30, here we go. We're going to first subtract that 8 over and put our plus c in its spot. So x squared plus 6x plus c equals negative 8 plus c. Okay, don't forget that when you put that 8 over, it's negative 8. Okay, we're going to group these two, and what do you multiply to get c, but when you add them, give you 6. And that is going to be 3 and 3, okay? And we have to figure out our c, so 3 times 3, this will be 9. So I'm going to add 9, and I'm going to add 9. And that makes the number over here, negative 8 plus 9, is 1. So we're going to have something kind of nice happening. X plus 3 squared equals 1. And if I take the square root, we already know that the square root of 1 is positive negative 1. Okay? And then the last thing, I subtract the 3. I'm going through these kind of fast, so if you need to pause, go for it. Positive 1 minus 3 is negative 2, and negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. So those are going to be my two solutions. Okay? All right, good. 31, last one of completing the square. Kick the 19 to the other side. X squared minus 14x plus c equals negative 19 plus c. Okay? All right, my two bubbles. Don't forget that this is a negative right here. Don't let that trick you. I'm going to multiply to get c and add to get negative 14. So I have x minus 7 and x minus 7, right, to add to get 14. I will not give you a number that's not an even number right here. I'm not going to be mean to you and make it like 3, and you have to like do 1.5 and 1.5 or something like that. So I will always give you an even number there. And then I have to figure out what c is. So negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. So I have 49 and 49, okay? Negative 19 plus 49, I think, is 30, because 19 is negative. So I've got 30 there, okay? So this is x minus 7 squared equals 30. Take the square root, x minus 7 equals, the square root of 30 doesn't come out nicely, so we're going to leave it as plus and minus the square root of 30. And then the last thing, add the 7 over. Okay, so I'm going to leave my answer as 7 plus minus square root of 30. There we go. There it is. Okay. All right, last part. Here we go. Find the value of the discriminant. That's A. Describe the number and type of solutions, okay? That's B, and then C is do the actual quadratic formula, okay? So the discriminant, I'm going to write the formula for discriminant up here, is B squared minus 4AC, okay? That number is whatever's inside of the square root, okay? So if that number is a positive number, if that number is 0, and if that number is a negative number, we'll have different things going on with our function, okay? So imagine that I have like a positive number inside of a square root, like a positive 3, right? I'm going to end up with two solutions because of that plus and minus. So I have two solutions, okay? If that number is 0 instead, I'm going to only end up with one solution because plus 0 is the same thing as minus 0, okay? And then if that number is negative, you probably remember this, like a negative 3, I'm going to end up with an imaginary number, so I have no solutions. Okay? All right, so that's kind of how that works. And then I'm going to write out the entire quadratic formula here. So negative b plus minus square root. Make sure you write this clearly because, write the formula out and don't make any mistakes writing out the formula. I have had people do that before and write out the formula wrong on their notes or something that they were using and get the entire thing wrong because they'll forget something or like they'll mess up the formula, and it's just because they wrote it wrong. So be careful. All right, here we go. First thing, discriminant. B squared minus 4AC. All right, B squared is negative 16 squared minus 4 times A is 1 and C is 64. Okay, negative 16 squared is 256 minus 256. Yes, so that is equal to 0. All right, so my discriminant is 0. That's my first solution. That was part A. B is how many, if my discriminant is 0, how many solutions do I have? I will have one solution, okay? That's part B, and then part C is doing the whole quadratic formula. So negative B will be positive 16 plus and minus the square root of, don't do this part again, we already know that that number is 0, all over 2 times A, which is 1, okay? The square root of 0 is 0, so I have like 16 plus 0 divided by 2. 16 plus 0 divided by 2 is 8. Now 16 minus 0 divided by 2 is also 8. That's why I only get one solution. Okay, so there's 32. I'm guessing that we're going to have like one of these is going to be 2 solutions, one of these is going to be no solutions, okay? This one was 1 solution. All right, so if you want to try these on your own, the first thing that you're going to need to do is join this 3x over here. So like subtract the 3x, okay? So x squared minus 3x equals 0 is what I would do, okay? Also, I would put plus 0 in here. So your c value, you have 0 in there for a c, okay? All right, if you need to pause to try to do this on your own, go for it. I'm going to do b squared minus 4ac. B squared minus 4ac. We're so close. B squared is negative 3 squared minus 4 times a is 1. C is 0. Okay. Negative 3 squared is 9. And 4 times 1 times 0 is 0. So the discriminant is 9. That's part A. Part B, if your discriminant is 9, then that means you will have 2 solutions. Okay? And now let's do the 2 solutions. So negative b will be a positive 3 plus minus the square root of that discriminant, which is 9, all over 2a, which is 1. Okay, here we go. The square root of 9 is 3. So I've got, and 2 times 1 is 2. So I've got 3 plus 3 divided by 2, and I've got 3 minus 3 divided by 2. Okay, 3 plus 3 is 6 divided by 2, which is 3, and 3 minus 3 is 0 divided by 2, which is 0. So those are my 2 solutions, just like I said right here. 2 solutions, okay? All right, last one. I'm guessing this one's going to be imaginary and have no solutions. We'll see, okay? All right, here we go. B squared, if you want to try this on your own, go for it. B squared minus 4ac. B squared is going to be 9 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2. Okay, we've got 81. Negative 4 times a positive 3 times negative 2 is going to be a positive number, and that is positive 24, positive 24. We're not going to end up with a negative number. That's weird. Okay, so 105 is my discriminant. That's part A. So then part B means that I have 2 solutions still, because that's a positive number. All right, part C is negative b, so negative 9 plus minus the square root of 105 all over 2 times a, which is 3, okay? And the square root of 105 does not come out nicely, so I get to just leave it. Negative 9 plus minus square root of 105, but I'm going to put it all over 6. I'll simplify this guy, okay? And I'm just going to leave my answer like that. Ooh. But that still represents 2 solutions because of the plus minus, right? It's just those solutions are going to be decimal numbers. Oh my heavens, that was a lot. Look at this review. Man, that's a lot of work to show on a review. Okay, all right, so any extra things that you want to add to the sides of your paper or whatever, if you have any room at all, you can put those on there. But yeah, there is that. We'll do some whiteboards tomorrow, okay?